My name is Robert Perry. I'm here today in Ventura, California, at the home of Joseph George Gregory, to interview Mr. Gregory for the Veterans History Project. Mr. Gregory served honorably in the United States Army, 75th Infantry Division, during World War II. He fought in Belgium, in the Battle of Bulge, and in the Rhineland Campaign. Under combat conditions, he rose from private first class to staff sergeant and squad leader in a few short months, and he received the Bronze Star. He was also part of the occupation of Germany. Mr. Gregory, on behalf of the Conejo Valley chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, it is my honor to interview you today. Our videographer is Mr. Ed Lynch. George, where and when were you born?
I was born in Ludlow, Massachusetts, March 1, 1925.
Okay. Can you tell me about your mother and father, what their occupations were?
Yes, my mother was strictly a homemaker. My father was a laborer.
Construction?
Construction laborer, right. And they both came from Italy. She came from Sicily, and he came from some area outside of Rome. However, he was not really able to work. He had a heart condition. And both very nice parents. I love my mother. My father, I can't say the same about him, but I don't think my family life was very cordial with my father. He died when I was 10 years old.
Wow.
And my mother died at the age of 99. I'm hoping I have her genes. I think I do, by the way. So.
What about your brothers and sisters? Your father married your mother. He already had a.
Yeah, you're right. My father and mother were both married twice. My father had 6 children from his first marriage. My mother had no children from her first marriage. On the second marriage, together they had 2. I'm one of them. And that was about that. That was about it.
Where were you in the hierarchy of
Youngest boy. My sister was 2 years younger than I am.
What's her name?
Millie. Amelia.
Amelia, okay. Amelia was 2 years younger. So you weren't the youngest. You know.
No.
Right. So what was that like growing up in a family that large?
What was that?
What was that like growing up in a family that large?
Pretty crowded. I can't tell you all the details, but we had no radio. It's hard to imagine. No car, no radio, no hot water. Pretty primitive.
Right.
10 people in a 3-bedroom house.
3-bedroom house, huh?
Yeah,
Wow.
it was a house.
So you had some roommates.
Yeah, I had some roommates. But my father was, how much did I tell you anyway? My father was a bootlegger. You know what that is?
Yes.
He made and sold alcoholic beverages illegally.
Right, there was prohibition at
Prohibition,
that time.
and
Right.
that was the way that he sustained our family, mostly. Some of the girls, older girls were working, so they helped support him, but he wasn't well. He couldn't do any heavy work, for one thing. And I think that's the main reason why at the age of 10, he decided to call it quits and he died. He had a heart attack right in the house. I was right there when it happened. And that was the end of him. And within 2 years, everyone had gone away. Everyone. The only one left was my mother, me, and my sister. All the others had gotten married or gone to some other towns and kind of left us alone.
How'd you get by?
Welfare.
Okay.
We were on welfare when I was 10 years old until I was 18. Of course, I had a lot of part-time jobs, lots of part-time jobs. Caddy, picking apples, shoveling snow, working at a hardware store. I had a lot of part-time jobs with very small pay, but helped the family a little bit. Finally, at 18, I graduated from high school.
Right. What high school did you graduate from?
Ludlow High School. I was the top of my class.
The very top? Number 1?
Number one.
That would have made you valedictorian.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we didn't use those fancy words in those days. Just top of the class, that's all. And then came time for the Army.
First of all, top of the class is quite an achievement.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Must have felt good.
Well, I know. I can't describe it to you properly. It didn't mean much to me, that's all. I was so involved with other problems at the time.
Like
My
what?
father had died. My mother was not well either, by the way. And I was trying as hard as I could to support them, but I couldn't. When I was 18 in March of 43, I went down to the local draft board and tried to get a deferment because of my mother. I said I wanted to support my mother. Well, the board didn't listen to that. And they look at a lot of fellows like you. We'll take care of your mother. You go in. So I put me in the Army, and that was it.
All right, so you graduated and went straight into the Army?
Yeah, straight into the Army. I graduated in June. I was in the Army in August.
Drafted, right? All right.
And then,
What's the first thing that happened there? Where'd you go?
well, I was inducted at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. But at the time, the Army had a program called the Army Specialized Training Program, ASTP. They came around to all the high schools and talked to the seniors, particularly those with the high grades and so on. And what the idea was from President Roosevelt and some other people was they were going to try to provide a professional cadre of people to take over the country when the war ended. They were looking ahead 4 or 5 years. They thought that was when the end of the war, which is not too bad, by the way. It was a good guess. So they wanted to get a lot of doctors, physicists, engineers, chemists, civil engineers, mathematicians, get them all trained, get their degrees. When the war was over, they could help run the country properly. That was good foresight, I thought. So I got into the program. I went to high school, took the exam, and I was notified that I was okay. I was in the program. I went to Fort Devens to be inducted. I went from there down to Fort Benning, Georgia. I got 14 weeks basic infantry training. And then, true to their promise, I went from there to Brooklyn College. Looked pretty good so far.
What were you taking there at Brooklyn College when you first got there?
Basic engineering, they called it. Mathematics, physics, chemistry, English, things like that.
Was engineering your strong point? It was your strongest subject?
I felt technically qualified. I was good in math and I was good in physics and so on. But Ludlow High School was a small school. I don't think we had more than 80 people in our senior class, so it wasn't like a big city college. But so there I went to Brooklyn College, and every Saturday night I go down to Times Square. Had myself a big time, I thought. And after the first semester, the captain, who was in charge of the 400 students at the school, called us in on a Saturday morning. He says, "Fellows, I got some bad news for you. The program has been dissolved." The whole program was dissolved. We had anywhere between 50 and 100,000 students around the country, like myself, in about 25 or 30 different colleges, all going through the same kind of program. I said, well, in my mind, being a young man of only 18 or 19, I rolled with the punches. I said, well, that's the way things go. Since then, I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I consider that to be one of the big blunders that the Army had. How could they plan ahead for 100,000 students, get them into college, and then call the whole thing quits, just like that?
Did you ever figure out why?
I did. I got a paper on it. It's a 6-page paper explaining why, in Army jargon, Army explanations, you know.
The long and the short of it is?
They tried to boil it down to this, that the situation in Europe was not going too well. They needed manpower. A very crude way of saying it, but what they said to us essentially was, you're young, you're healthy, you're very intelligent, because OCS in those days had an IQ of 110 minimum. Most of us were above 140.
Right.
Smart bunch of guys. Healthy, young people, smart. I think the worst part, which I'll never forgive the Army for, was if you enlisted, or even if you were drafted, you had some choice of service. Army, Navy, Air Force, Signal Corps. We didn't have any choice. They took 100,000 guys like me and put us all in the infantry, all of us. I couldn't pick my branch. That was terrible.
That's because that's what they needed at the moment.
That's what they needed. I know, I understand that. But
And they canceled your program because they needed that.
that's exactly right. That's what they say anyway. But there were other reasons given, but that's the major one. So, here we are. My college career is cut short. And I went from Times Square in New York, Brooklyn, on a Saturday. The following Monday, I was in Louisiana in the swamps on maneuvers. That was a very cold change in my career path, I'll tell you.
Right.
So I'm down in Louisiana with the other people, and 1 week it lasted. The group that was there was just about finishing their maneuvers, which was about 3 weeks. I was there for 1 week, and I still didn't know what was going to happen to me. When I went to Louisiana, I recall getting off the train, and we went right straight down to the barracks in Camp Polk. And the sergeants had about 4 or 5 lines, and they were signing us up. Very simple, by the way. We all became MOS 745 riflemen.
Right.
So we stayed there a couple of days, and then we got back on a train. We went to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky. When I got to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, I was then informed that I was now a member of the 75th Infantry Division.
Were you issued a rifle at that time?
Was that what?
Were you issued a rifle at that time?
Yes. Yeah, I got a rifle.
You got
I got a rifle at Camp Breckenridge, right.
M1 Garand?
It was a Garand, yeah.
What'd you think of the
M1.
Garand? What'd you think of the Garand?
I knew nothing about weapons, but it was a nice weapon. I knew it was I had no experience with rifles at all. Looked good, felt good. On a range, it turned out to be pretty good for me.
How'd you do?
I never became an expert, but I became, what they, marksman or what? What they, sharpshooter? I forget the grades they had now, 2 or 3 grades. I was under.
Yeah, it's
bottom one,
usually
probably.
marksman, sharpshooter, and
Yeah,
expert.
no, I wasn't sharpshooter, no. So anyway, Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, which is up near the Indiana state line, Evansville, Indiana. And the cadre up there had come from Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. That was the beginning of the division. They transferred all of the cadre to Breckenridge. They became our training cadre, and we just became riflemen there. So we stayed there, more training, more infantry training, from April of 44 till October of 44, about almost 6 months.
Okay.
More training, constant training. You know, marches, 10-mile marches and all that stuff.
Maneuvers, that kind of thing. Infantry maneuvers, that kind of stuff.
All maneuvers, yeah, plenty of maneuvers. And in October, I went to, we went to Camp Shanks, New York, and we went overseas on a cargo ship. I think it was called the USS Brazil. I'm not positive, no, but it sounds familiar.
How many men were on board that cargo ship?
Oh, 5,000.
What was that ship designed to carry?
It's a cargo ship. I don't know what it was exactly, but it wasn't built for troops.
Was it crowded?
Oh boy. You had to breathe upward, sideways. I recall that we had English food. I'll never forget this. Once I opened a loaf of bread and it was full of worms. That was our rations for the day.
Wow.
Worm-eaten bread. I couldn't get over it. Supplied by the English people to us, and I wasn't very hungry after that. Anyway, we finished. I went to Wales. That's where we disembarked, in Wales. It took us across a little channel there into England. We stayed in England from October through November. More training, by the way, more infantry training. In November, we began to move forward, and we went through France, and going towards Belgium. And then I got into combat, my first combat in December, Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve was my first day in combat,
Right.
1944.
Now, all this time with these people you trained with and on through England and France and like that on into Belgium, was this the same company, the
Yes.
same battalion,
Same people,
same,
yeah.
same commanding officer, all that?
Same group. Well, some of the top brass might have changed, way up general, but the lower, so my regiment down was all the same guys that I'd been Kentucky with.
Did you find that was a good thing?
Well, it made me feel comfortable. You know, we're all in the same boat. We all knew each other, and we all had the same story to tell. I didn't find that upsetting in any way. It was okay.
Sounds like people you could rely on.
Yeah, that's it. I got to rely upon them more than you talk to them all the time, see them every day. And so then we, as you approached.
Well, tell me about this hill the first night. The
I'm
hill.
sorry, that first night, yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Christmas Eve, tell me about that hill.
Well, I wanted to tell you about that because as we approached the front, we knew we were getting into trouble because you could see the artillery flashes miles away, artillery all over the place, you know. And then as you got closer, we kept seeing more and more dead horses and cattle laying on the side of the road, you know.
Right.
Dead. So we knew this is it, fellas. You're getting into it now.
Now, were you marching or in a truck?
Marching. It was all marching. They dropped us off maybe 10 miles before we got there, and then we were walking the rest of the way. One thing, by the way, Bob, isn't it?
Bob.
I feel very strongly now that the lack of intelligence was very, very noticeable, poor. We went to this hill in Belgium. This is just the beginning of the bulge now. It just started, a couple of days at the most. We had absolutely no knowledge of why we were even going up the hill. No one ever told us. My platoon sergeant never said a word about it. Fellas, we're going up that hill right now, and that was it. So we started going up in, what do you call that, combat, when you're all in one of those-
Combat formation?
Yeah, combat formation, anyway.
So you mean the intelligence, meaning military intelligence, intel. You didn't
Right.
have any intel on why you were going up
Nothing,
this hill or anything?
nothing,
Well, as a
nothing.
PFC, they may not have told you that, though.
We never, well, if they knew it, yeah, but we're the fighters, we're the guys that are going to face it. What good is it for the generals to know about it if the guys that are doing it don't know where they're going?
Well, I agree with you, but I also know that they don't always tell the line troops.
But to me, it's important. This was our first night in combat.
Yeah.
You know, if we'd been there 6 months or something, you know, you kind of roll. This is our first night. So, about halfway up the hill, they started shooting at us. The Germans were entrenched on the top of the hill in foxholes, looking down at us.
Right.
The best kind of target in the world, you know. We had a couple of definitely enfiladed areas where we could kind of hide, but not. My sergeant got shot right away. Got a whole bullet through the shoulder. My staff sergeant, my squad leader. So it continued through the night. It was terrible. The artillery finally came in, our artillery. They finally found it. This was twilight, so we still had some visibility. But as the hours went on, it got darker and darker. Finally, everybody was just shooting at rifle fire. If you saw a flash, you shoot at it. That's all you could do. Artillery did the same thing. They knew where we were. They finally got over our heads onto the enemy positions. They began to strike them pretty well. In the meantime, we were trying to advance. It was a terrible night. I can't even recall the hours, and a lot of guys were getting killed, getting wounded. It was a bad situation in my estimation.
A lot
anyway.
of casualties in your unit.
Lots of casualties, many of them. When next morning, when the sun rose, we could see the bodies all over the place.
Your own bodies. Friends. People that are close to you.
Yeah, that's the guys.
It's all right, man. I understand.
They're
That was your first night.
75 years later, and they still react to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. That's always going to be with you.
Doesn't go
Anyway,
away.
the guys are laying up on top of the hill and dismembered bodies, legs here and there, and it's just terrible. But the Germans had been displaced. They had moved back. The artillery helped us a lot. I don't know how effective our fire was, but we kept advancing, and that's when the guys were getting killed and so on, because even though we couldn't see each other, they still had the advantage of shooting downhill and we were shooting uphill. So anyway, the next day, that was the first day in combat, and it was terrible for us. There were too many bodies around for me to stomach. I couldn't stand it, so we did the best we could. We continued from there, but from that point on, I'll have to pinpoint some different situations. I can't recall all the details, but I think I'd like to say right now, Bob, I'm quoting somebody else now, either Roosevelt or Churchill, war is hell. And I don't think, well, I think especially for the infantrymen, he knows it. Other people can hear about it and read about it and see it on television, but the only guy that can really know about it is the guy in the front line.
So you moved to Belgium. How'd that Battle of the Bulge go, though? I mean, were you held back for a while?
That was nip and tuck for a while. We hadn't even seen any tanks yet, because the Germans had put in a whole slew of tanks at that time, but they were not, supposedly speaking, Bob, our area that we were supposed to be the most thinly defended area in the Ardennes. This is the Ardennes forest area, and that's why the Germans picked it. Very thin. You had the guys, 100 feet apart. It was just very, very thin defense there. That's why they picked it. Hitler was not completely insane, but he knew what he was doing sometimes. So they would come and they tried to they didn't get through us that night. We were managed to hold them and push them back. They finally abandoned the position on the hill, went back a mile or so and had new positions back there. But all I can say when I say war is hell is that when you're constantly, and maybe it varies with different people, but when you're constantly worrying about whether you're going to get killed in the next minute or not, it kind of takes your mind off other problems.
Right.
Most of the time I'm worrying, am I going to get it next? Here's John over here, he got killed last night. Here's Joe over here, he got wounded. When is my turn? Well, I got to consider myself fortunate somehow. I was never wounded. Had a lot of close calls. One time, a little later, a couple weeks later, the Germans, their famous artillery piece was an 88 millimeter cannon. That was their favorite. And what they had done at that point was they were beginning to use the artillery like rifles. They were pinpointing individual soldiers with the artillery shell. Instead of trying to get the whole group, they find, well anyway, I was one of the guys that they found. I went to, it was my turn to get rations that day. So I went in a foxhole, went across a clearing, not too wide, maybe 50 feet wide or something. Son of a gun, about halfway through, I heard the bullet, I heard the shell coming. Threw myself on the ground, it exploded about 30, 40 feet away from me. That was for me, I know it was, but I was only guy walking. One of the shrapnel went right through my canteen on my hip, right through it. If it had gone about that much lower, it would have been me. I got through that one okay. That's one of the situations. One was, oh yeah, I had, oh yeah. I was still a PFC at the time. And we had come to an area in Germany now. We had gone from Belgium into Germany now. And we had come to a very open area, like an open field. It was snowing, very lightly, maybe that much snow on the ground. At that time, I had been promoted to staff sergeant. So the lieutenant says, George, he says, take 3 men and go out and find out where the Germans are. Go out and find out where the Germans are. I said, what? Big open field, no trees out there, wide open space, as far as you could see. I said, gee, Lieutenant, this is kind of tough. Look at it, we have to find out where they are. Go out there, and when they start shooting at you, then you'll know where they are, right? I said, yeah. What a cold way to talk about it. But so I got 3 men with me. We were just ready to start, and by the grace of God, This is what it was. Just at that moment, up comes the medic truck. 4 medics inside. All right, fellas, line up. We're going to check your feet. So we lined up. Came to me, took my shoes off. He says, "You got trench foot. You're not going anywhere." He sent me back right at that moment. I was saved from that trip. I didn't have to go out with the group. He took me, sent me back to the rear. I spent a month back there.
When he said that, that probably felt like the air going out of a balloon,
Oh,
right?
boy, did it.
Yeah, I know the feeling. It happened to me too.
Oh, man, you're right, Bob. I said, God, you're wonderful the way you do things, but I never did find out, by the way, whatever happened to that mission. I don't know. But in my mind, I had some experience by that time. I couldn't see going across an open field covered with snow, only 6 inches, we didn't even have the white capes. We had the regular uniforms. We'd be sticking out like a German back there in that foxhole could see us coming a mile away. To my estimation, it was almost a suicide mission. I didn't know what else to think about it.
I agree with you.
But anyway, that's what happened. It turned out well. I went back for a month, came back, sent you back to the lines again. If you don't know what trench foot is, by the way, it's the next stage before a frozen feet. Your feet are really, you've lost circulation, you're turning white, your skin is getting very, very sensitive to everything. And the medic says right away, "George, you've got trench foot. Get out of here now. If you stay here another week, you're going to lose your feet." So that's when I went back for trench foot. But again, I don't know how to put myself in my lieutenant's feet, Bob. I don't know what he was thinking, but he must have known more than I did. But there again, you do that very often, by the way. They send you out on these patrols, better conditioned than we had, trying to flush out the enemy. Where are they? What are they doing? How many are there? You know what you can tell is they hear by the gunfire, and you can tell where they are just by that. So that was another situation. Then the third one, I'm trying to pinpoint these, Bob. This again is in Germany.
Were you in the Rhineland now? Were you in the Rhineland by now?
Yeah, in the Rhineland, right. That's our final. We had another situation here. Now, in the meantime, when I talk about these things, Bob, we're still being shot at all the time, and we're firing back. We're taking foxholes and this and that, and everyone's doing it. There's nothing unusual about it. We're all doing the same thing. Guys are still getting hit, though. One time, we had just, maybe a couple of days had gone over the bridge into Germany, and we were attacking another place. It was kind of like a slight rise, but not really a hill. And me and my assistant squad leader there was a house in the opening by itself, and it looked okay to us, so we started going towards a house or cover they were shooting at. There's a big German tank right behind the house. A big German tank, not a Tiger, but a big one. And they must have seen us. The big artillery piece was swiveling around towards. I says, Bill, his name was Bill Mayer. "What the hell are we going to do now, Bill?" We're lucky we had a stand-up foxhole, one of the kind you can stand up in. We both dove into it, maybe 10 feet away. But we also knew that artillery shell, all we got to do is shoot it towards the opening, and the shrapnel would kill us. There's no way we get out of it. So we began to pray, both of us. All we had was a rifle against a big tank. I don't know what happened. Again, I got to depend on the big boy. God, there was no firing. He didn't fire at us. We waited 10 minutes, no firing. Finally came out and the tank was gone. Nowhere behind the house.
Probably got orders to do something else.
Probably had orders. You're right, Bill. I don't. He was gone. But I'll tell you, stand-up foxhole is the kind these are German built. They could build in there. They could serve food in there and drink and talk and so on. You stand up in there instead of in the foxhole. You're laying down. Big enough, but there were little chambers in there. But the whole thing was pretty much wide open. Big opening for you to come into. Again, on the tank, he had an 88 millimeter on the tank itself. I knew, and he knew it too, that we were praying. We were praying at that point. One shot. All you had to do was aim it at that hole. That shrapnel
anywhere near it.
he would have killed us.
Yeah.
No question about it. That's twice now that I got away with it. Those are my close calls anyway. What happened next? If you have any questions, Bob, shooting at me. I'm trying to pinpoint.
Keep going. This is good.
Well, there are a couple instances where one time just after, about 2 weeks after we had our first encounter with the Germans, there was a task force. I can't recall the name of them. Hogan's or Logan's, something or other. A bunch of guys with ski mask on, caps on, and faces all black, Americans. Coming up the hill, they had just escaped the Germans. They were looking for shelter. They got it from us. We were a regiment right there. I don't know who they were, but apparently they had been in German territory behind the German lines and had inflicted a lot of damage. They were being chased to a high hill to get out of there. They came to our area and we gave them some kind of shelter. Which brings me to another situation, Bob. This was about a month, 3 weeks before the war ended, end of April. And our regiment had just cleared the area around what they call a displacement camp, POW camp, not a concentration camp, but these were slave laborers from people who had been captured by the Germans, like the Poles and Hungarians, and put into these camps and did all the work for them, labor. A very sad sight, though. We got in there and 90,000 of them in that one camp, emaciated, starving, and just
That was just before the war was over, right?
They were thankful to see us. We freed them, essentially, but they were in such poor shape, their bones are hanging out, and the Germans had treated them pretty badly, I guess, but at least they weren't as bad as the concentration camps where they were mostly Jewish. But these people were different races, and so we able to help these people, give them food and give them drink and so on, and that was about the end of that. Now, there's another situation, Bob, I want to get a hold of it. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but they're all tied together. And now this next one, I don't even know if it's worth telling you about it, but it's we had advanced into Germany, and one time, just before this camp I was talking about, we had come across a small town with some Germans in it, and they had fled in one direction, and for some reason, one of the guys took off in the opposite direction, the German, going across an open field next to a irrigation trench. So we're looking at him. He's about, I don't think it's maybe 50 yards away, and he's running away. No weapons. He's running away like fast. So I don't know what influenced my thinking, but 3 or 4 guys got together. We began to take pot shots at him. Not very nice. We finally hit him, but he wasn't killed. He hit him and he crawled into that irrigation trench. We never saw him again. But that's the way we felt in those days. The war was going well now, but it was still terrible, and they were still killing us. And there was one of them out there, was shooting at him, and kind of far away for your target. But we finally got him in the leg, I guess, and he dropped and went into the trench, and that was about it. Just before then, we had captured approximately 20 German soldiers, and now this is the pleasant part of it. And I'm looking them over now. I'm one of the non-coms, and one of the Germans had a kind of a black grayish box on his shoulder. I said, "What is that?" I knew a little bit of German. So he opened the box, and what do you think is inside? An accordion. An accordion inside. I didn't play the accordion, But he was a prisoner of war, and I felt that I had more right to it than he did, so I took it from him. And that accordion, I didn't show you, Bob, did I?
No.
It's in my room. I've had that accordion with me now for 70 years. Still with me. Every time I look at it, I think of that poor German guy. He said he probably was crying his head off because he must have been playing it. And that's one of the parts of war that is not too bad to take, but I took that part of it.
Okay. So you stuck around, your division stuck around after the war was over for a few
Our
weeks.
division was an occupation division, right. What happened though, Bob, was this was May 6th when the war ended, right? From May, June, 2 months approximately, we were on occupation duty, and that's when the word came down that we were now being transferred from our 75th Division to the 2nd Division. We became transferees to a new division.
Okay.
The 75th had the red, white, and blue decal, and the 2nd Division had just the arrow. That's the Arrowhead Division. I mean, the Star Division, like a Texas Alamo Star.
Okay.
With a soldier's head in the middle. I can show you both of those. And we came to the States with the idea, we were told, you guys are going to the Pacific now. Go home for 30 days, get on a boat, and go to the Pacific and help the guys over there. Well, the rest is history.
Wait a minute. Now, did you come back on a transport ship?
Yes,
And how long did that take?
much better. It took us about a week.
All right. And
It took us 2 weeks to get over, about a week to get back.
wasn't as crowded on the ship?
No,
Better.
much better. Food was better, everything was better. So we came back to the States, and I got my 30 days furlough in July.
Tell me what that was like.
Well, it was very nice. My family was there for me, and that was about it. I only had my mother and my sister. Everyone else was gone.
How'd they treat you?
You mean the other people?
Other people, other people and your family.
My family, of course, was overjoyed to see me, finally. Because we had contact during the letters, and they'd send me cakes and so on once in a while, but they were very happy to see me, my sister and my mother. Finally, George is home. The townspeople, if I happened to meet someone I knew, hey, George, good to see you, but nothing, no ceremonies, nothing like that. And it was very quiet. This is how July of 45.
It was all positive, though, right?
All positive. Oh, nothing negative. No, nothing. In August, was it September or August, they dropped the atomic bomb in Japan.
Right.
The war was over.
Now, were you still on leave at that time?
I was on leave. I had about another week to go yet. I went back to Fort Devens.
How'd you feel about that when you heard
that? Well, I knew the war in Europe was over, and here's Japan. I had no idea what they were going to do. I still thought maybe they're going to send us over for occupation or something, but they didn't. The war was over now. I went back to Fort Devens. They sent me from there down to Camp Swift, Texas. Training. I was supposed to be training recruits. I didn't do anything from September until November of that same year. Then I was discharged, honorable discharge, in November of 45. Came back home again. And that's when I went back to college. That's when I enlisted in, enrolled in Worcester Polytechnic Institute, engineering school, and went back to college again.
GI Bill, right?
GI Bill. I never could have afforded it. We had no money. Our family was broke.
Now, they fast-tracked you through there in 3 years, right?
Yeah, right.
Electrical engineering?
Yeah, electrical engineering. And they gave us what they call a accelerated program. It started in March of 46, and I graduated in June of 49. We only had one summer vacation. We kept going all the way through.
Did you like it?
I didn't mind it. Of course, I got married at the time. That was another story, Bob. I don't want to even go into that one, but I got married my freshman year. Big mistake. I think it's impossible to go to an engineering school. They're tough anyway. And get married at the same time. Very difficult. So my scholastic standing was okay, but it wasn't as good as it should have been. I want to get back to see if I missed anything in the war here, Bob. There were a number of cases where I was actually very close to someone who got hurt. But there was two explicit cases. We were in a little knoll overlooking a little rise going down towards the German, and they were down the other end. And a fellow next to me, one of my squad members, maybe that far away. And we're looking down, trying to find a target to shoot at and so on. All of a sudden, there's a zip. He got shot in the side of the head. His brains were hanging out of his head. He was still living. Took him back to the medic. They didn't know what the hell to do with him. I could see the gray matter of his head hanging out of his ear. I know he was going to die, but he was still living. He was talking and everything else. That's the closest I ever came to something like that. And then the other guy that I met, a number of guys, we had just attacked a town or something. We were all rushing towards the town, and they had putting up pretty much of a resistance, and a couple of guys got hit in the throat. And ever since, there's a horrible wound in my life. The guy's throat was open. He was trying to talk. Couldn't breathe. Jeez. That's it. You can turn it off for a while now. Like I say, this is 70 years later. I'm amazed how emotional I can get.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't come out until years later.
But those are
Because
those
when
are horrendous experiences.
Because when you're doing it,
Yeah.
it's procedural. You're just
That's
in there,
right.
it's just, okay, what's the next thing I
What's
gotta
next?
do to stay alive?
What's
See,
next?
Yeah.
That's exactly it. What can I do to keep alive?
And then years later, you think about the emotion involved in the thing, and it comes out. And that's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
Just telling the story now is gonna bring out a lot. But it's good for you. And you're recording history here for our country. The people
Well,
that
I know-
weren't even born then have no idea, you know.
I know a lot of guys have gone through worse than what I have. I know that. But the only part that I can recall is mine. Everyone has their own story to tell. This
right.
morning, Bob, just before I met you, there was a young student from Pepperdine. I'm sorry about this thing because I didn't know about it till yesterday. When Stacy, the director, she says, "George, we got a young student from Pepperdine who wants to talk to veterans. Will you have time tomorrow?" I forgot about this completely. I said, "Sure, what time?" "Oh, 10:30. I said, "Okay." And then when I got back to my room, look at my calendar, "I'm going to meet you at 11. I thought, "Oh, jeez." But she asked the same, not the same kind of question. She was interested from a student point of view. But she asked me about like Saving Private Ryan, for example.
Yeah.
She said, "Did you have any relationship with that movie, you know?" I started thinking about it, and I said, "Well," I said, "I was involved emotionally as far as saving him because he had 4 brothers in the service, or whatever it was. That was an emotional attachment with me because my brother was in Pearl Harbor. He got wounded. First, he was wounded by aircraft. He got shot in the chest with a .45 caliber. Took him a year to get over it. And finally, he got cured. But I thought about him when I was talking about the movie.
So you saw the movie.
I saw the movie. Oh yeah, I've seen it twice.
You think it was realistic?
Most of it was. There were a lot of little areas where they threw in a lot of extra, but I think it was pretty close, wasn't it?
I thought it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't in World War II, but it looked realistic to me.
Who was it? Was it Hanks? Who was his
Tom
star?
Hanks played the captain.
Oh, he's Hanks. Yeah, yeah. I thought most of it was only a couple of scenes, like when the German was on his chest, sticking a knife in his arm. That was probably a little bit exaggerated. She asked me, I said, "No." I said, most of the movies I see, most of them, are probably over-exaggerated as far as the hero is concerned. He does things that you normally don't do, you know, like killing 150 guys or something like that, but for the most part, I said, they're pretty good. They're pretty accurate. Oh, well, this is not quite as personal, but one time during the early part of our Battle of the Bulge experience, maybe 2 weeks later, snow on the ground as usual, and we were very conscious of passwords. Everybody knew the password because the Germans would come over and crawl around. You wouldn't know one from a friend from an enemy, you know. But this happened one night. I was witness to it. A tech sergeant, who was a platoon leader at the time, instead of a lieutenant, was checking on his men. And he was in a distance, not too far away, but he's going around checking, you know, asking for the password and so on. It's snowing, it's nighttime. Sure enough, he goes to this hole, a shot rings out. There are two young kids in there, recruits more or less. They killed their platoon sergeant. It was terrible.
And he was just checking,
He was
making
checking on the
his
guys.
rounds.
What's the password, you know, and making sure they're okay. I don't think they gave him a chance. All I heard him was saying, "What's a pow?" He got shot right through the head, and I was into him. Sergeant Stadler was his name, I recall now. He was a tech sergeant. The guy came from Leonard Wood with the original 75th Division. Been in with the group now for a couple of years now. I thought there was a heck of a way to end your life. Your own men killing you on a routine. But they were recruits, young fellows, probably 19 years old, a couple of days in combat perhaps, and they must have been scared stiff anyway. So they didn't take time to be careful about what they're doing. But that lives in my mind too for quite a while.
All right. Let's go ahead to where you were in Worcester Polytech. You graduated from there in 1949 with a degree in electrical
engineering, right.
Okay. Now, what's the next thing that happened?
Okay, next thing that happened was I got 3 different jobs. Sprague Electric in North Adams, Massachusetts, as my home state. Bendix Radio in Baltimore, Maryland. Third company, Sperry. Sperry Gyroscope in Great Neck, New York. I spent approximately 2 years with each one.
6 years total.
6 years total. As an engineer. I found out, much to my chagrin, I didn't like engineering. Straight engineering, laboratory type engineering, you know, fooling around with the circuits and everything. So I changed my career path. I went from engineering to sales engineering. Now, the sales engineering still required a technical background. But instead of working in the laboratories, you're out talking to potential customers, trying to sell them some equipment.
Okay.
I was selling test equipment, electrical test equipment.
Anytime.
Let's go back a minute to your combat experience. How was it that you received the Bronze Star?
Okay. You have the Medal of Honor, Silver Star, Gold Star. Those are all for individual acts of heroism.
Right.
The Bronze Star is a unit act of heroism. Our company and regiment performed very well in the Ardennes. If you read at the bottom there, the bottom 2 sentences. For meritorious ground action against the enemy. So that is not an individual medal, it's a unit medal.
Okay.
So
if you got the Bronze Star with the Combat V, that would be an individual medal.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And that's what this is all about. So this is all in the Ardennes. This is strictly for the Ardennes offensive.
Basically the Battle of the Bulge.
Battle of the Bulge, that's when it all
Being
happened.
in on the Battle of the Bulge, your unit got a Bronze Star.
Just about.
All right.
And later on,
Completely
when
understandable.
we get to it, I wanted to show you, this may interest you, Bob, I'm not too sure. And I can hold it off if you want. But this is a summary of the 75th Division achievements in World War II. But here, for example, killed, 888 were killed of the division. Wounded, 2,900 wounded. Missing, 96.
This is out of a division of what, 12,000 men or?
Almost 16,000, including the artillery and everything.
Right.
Battle casualties, 4,000. Individual awards, Distinguished Service Cross, 3. These are guys who really knew what they're doing. Legion of Merit, 3. Silver Star, 114 of the whole division. Bronze Star, 1,200. So that's 1,200 out of 16,000. It's about 6%. That's what I'm talking about here.
Right.
Not individual actions, but as a unit, you did a good job, and whoever it was at the time must have been 1944. Who would that be? Who was in? Was that Roosevelt?
Yeah, still
Yeah.
Roosevelt.
The President of the United States, authorized by executive order, February of '44, Bronze Star Medal to George Gregory for meritorious achievement in ground operations against the enemy. So that's the whole bunch of us. But we didn't all get it. That's only 1,200 out of the whole division, so they were still being selective about that. I got a feeling, Bob, they probably picked the non-coms first.
Okay.
They figured probably they were the ones that had most to do with it as compared to all the recruits that were coming in. We would get a bunch of recruits almost every week. Guys get shot and in come a whole bunch of new guys. I don't know what they're doing out there, but okay. Now you want to continue with the schooling, or
Yeah, well, you finished your school, you
Oh, three
graduated,
places,
and you
yep.
had these 3 different jobs over 6 years, and you decided that the electrical engineering per se wasn't for you. You liked the sales end of it better, and you were out doing sales work.
correct?
Is this when you went into business for yourself?
Yes, I'm going to tell you about it. There's at that time a very popular organization called Manufacturers Representatives, and make a long story short, if you were a company like Hewlett Packard or Sperry or someplace, you had 2 choices when it came to selling your products. You could either have your own sales force, or you could have a group like a representative who would represent you in a certain territory. I had New England. So the companies I represented in New England would pay me a commission on all my sales in that territory.
Okay.
That's the way I made my living. Strictly commissions, only commissions. But that's why they call you manufacturer's representative. But there came a time in their career, the companies that is, when they found it would be more profitable to have their own inside sales force rather than a representative. When you have an inside sales force, they're giving you 100% of the time. A representative has to share your time with 8 or 10 other companies.
Right.
Because you represent all the companies in the given territory. That's the way your contract's written. So that's what happened. I was with this representative group for 2 years after these 6 years, and then I decided I was time to start my own business. I felt confident. So I started my own business from scratch. No, nothing. Zero. I think I had $2,000 in the bank,
Okay.
and that was it. I've been married in the meantime. I got married in my first year in college.
Right. Your
So I started,
your wife's name?
Rachel.
Rachel. Okay, and then you had a child right away, or?
No, we didn't have a child till I got into my own business,
Okay.
frankly. So I started my own business, very small, and I'm not bragging right now. Just the facts, right? Zero capital, but I knew the territory, and I knew the companies, and I knew the products, so I had that to offer them. They in turn had to take a chance on me. Well, who are you? You never had any experience doing that. You're not even a representative. Why should I give you? I try to sell them by talking to them.
Right.
So my experience, my background, education, whatever kind of, not bull, but whatever kind of support you can give to your own self. If they are bought on your presentation, they'll sign a contract with you. Try out for a year anyway. So first year, I had an office in an upstairs building, machine shop downstairs. I was upstairs, and no one there except me. And I did all my own sales calls, covering 6 states. Finally, I think after 2 or 3 months, I hired a secretary. Took care of my office for me and did, make a long story short, from 1956 until 72, I was in the business.
Selling electrical components,
Electrical instruments,
instruments.
the test equipment they call it.
Right. Now you
Very
were,
expensive stuff
now you were doing this for all different companies.
for different companies. They all made different products, see? One company would make electron tubes, one would make generators, one would make analyzers and so on. They didn't conflict with each other. So I had a spread of all kinds of equipment.
Was this successful?
Very, yeah. 1972, I sold it. I'll tell you why in a minute. I sold it to two employees of mine who've been with me 5 years. They bought me out. I retired and came to California. Well, I'll tell you, the best year, every year we grew. Started off alone, and I had a telephone in my office. Whenever I wasn't there, I pushed a little switch on the phone, and the telephone, if a customer called, would ring at my home, where my wife was. She'd answer the phone for me, see? That's the way you took care of your phone calls. And then I hired a secretary, and she took care of the calls. Well, I'll tell you, instead of going through all the rigmarole, Bob, which took me months, my best year was in 1967. This is back in 1967, not a very strong time of the year, but we had $6 million in sales. $6 million bucks. I had 5 engineers working for me, salespeople. I had 2 offices, one in Connecticut and one in Massachusetts. A secretary in each office. I had 1 man down there and 5 up here, 6 men. I had 1 man inside the office, technical man, take care of complaints and stuff like that. So I had about 8 or 9, 10 people altogether. $6 million sales. Not bad.
Not bad at all.
Back in that time.
Right.
That was my best year. Of course, it was a struggle getting there, but every year was better than last year, every year. So in 1972, I sold it out. By that time, I was, almost 72 and 20, 57 years old, I guess. Or, yeah.
Young to retire, but if you had the money, why not, right?
I had the money. I retired at that time with $250,000 in cash that I'd accumulated over the past 16 years.
Right.
250 grand. I felt I had the world by the tail, but I didn't, that's what I thought. Retired, took the wife and my daughter, whom I had a child by then, came to California because my brother was living here. He was a court reporter in Santa Barbara. And I'd been to California 6 or 8 times in my business. I had 3 companies I represented who were in California. So I came to California, Santa Barbara, retired there. Played golf for a while. I played a lot of golf. Played golf, and then I went semi back into business. I did a little bit of consulting. Didn't like it, too big a territory. Didn't have the staff, and too big a job, so I didn't bother. I went to work at Santa Barbara City College in 1980. From 1980 to 1984, I was a teacher up there, City College, marketing, management. For 4 years, part-time teacher. I couldn't get credentialed because I didn't have the right background, but I was being paid as a consultant. 1984, another career started. Dr. McDougall was the president of the college, and in my years as a teacher, I had gotten to know him pretty well. So one time I approached him. I said, "Doctor, community colleges are an old story in California. You've been doing it for years." I said, "But you all have the same pattern. You have a campus, and the students come to your campus and listen to your professors, and that's the way they teach them." I says, my proposal is this: why not take your teachers away from campus into the workplace and teach the people right where they're working? He thought it was a great idea. 4 years is what we did. We gathered 12,000 students in that time.
Wow.
I'll give you an example. You're going to teach mathematics. Well, you may have engineers and so on. They come to campus twice a week. Professor teaches them mathematics. With the plan I put forward, the teacher, the professor, would go from his place to the workshop, like Sperry or whatever it was. and teach them in their classroom. So they had the convenience of not having to go to school, do it right in the workplace, very cheap, very efficient. It worked out very well. And California only had one requirement. You can do that whenever you want, but you have to have the classes open to the public. That's the only restriction. Tuition almost free. So that worked for 4 years. At the end of 4 years, I was 65, and I said, Doctor, I said, I'm tired. I've been in this business long enough, I quit. That was it.
That was the last job you had, right?
That's the last job I had. I quit, and
Play a lot of golf after that?
I played a lot of golf.
Right. Now, meanwhile, how's your family situation? Are you married to Rachel all this time?
No. That's the sad part, Robert. My wife died of bone cancer
What year?
23 years ago.
All right.
Be what, I'm not subtracted in my mind. And so I married her sister,
What was her name?
Evelyn.
Evelyn. And how long were you married to Evelyn?
22 years. Rachel, 48 years, Evelyn, 22. She died of a heart problem.
All right.
So I lost two wives through death.
How many children did you have between both those wives? One child?
Just one. With Rachel. Evelyn had 4 of her own
All right.
before we got married.
So you had some grown stepkids then. Yeah. Okay, so then your daughter's name?
My daughter's name is Michelle.
Michelle, okay. And then
Michelle Crawford. She married a Marine, by the way. And her children, one is named April and one is named Michael. My grandchildren.
Yeah, 2 grandchildren, April and
grandchildren.
Michael.
Yeah, right. And they all live up in Lompoc,
Okay.
up north of Santa Barbara.
So you're in touch with April, right?
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to see her a week from tomorrow.
Okay. All right. So now you
Retired?
moved into here. What?
I'll
beginning?
tell you, July 5th. What happened then was, after my second wife died, we had this big house up in Santa Barbara. Ventura. It was too big for me. I checked the retirement homes in the area. I don't know if you've been to Fuente, but the retirement home like Bonaventure and Cypress Point and Townhouse, $3,500 a month for rent.
Right.
Well, I could afford it, by the way, but I still thought it was kind of steep. Somebody put me in touch with right here.
Yeah.
He said, George, why don't you check the VA? Well, at first I said, what? VA? I was thinking about it as an old folks home, where
Right.
everybody's hobbling around on crutches, and it's not that. I came down and had a visit.
Now this is July of this year.
July of this year, right. Came down in July, looked the place over. I said, geez, not too bad after all. It's air conditioned, 24 hours a day, completely air conditioned, 3 meals a day, nurses and doctors on campus.
Okay.
If you have any problems, right here. You got a nurse on duty 24 hours a day. You got a doctor coming in 5 days a week, regular medical doctor. You can take your car out whenever you want. You just sign a sheet, you go out wherever you want, anytime you want, come back whenever you want. They don't care about it. And you have activities all day long here. Accordion player, dancers, musicians. Every week someone comes in, and we have close contact with the community, very close. We have a lot of veterans groups like Port Hueneme and can't think of some of these names around, but they come and visit us once. American Legion, Moose, very close contacts here.
What are some of your hobbies here?
My hobbies, the ones I've got right now, 5 months ago I started playing the piano. I just began, I got 5 months of lesson. I'm doing pretty well, by the way, very well.
Good to hear that.
5 months of piano. I got electric piano. The reason being that I don't want to bother anybody. So you can't hear the electric, I got the earphones.
Okay.
So everyone's happy, no one hears it. I play ping pong quite regularly. I play bocce ball regularly, once a week for both. I go to the gym 6 days a week, 20 minutes each time. You got a very nice gym, fully equipped.
Okay.
So gym, bocce ball, ping pong,
You like to
piano.
read? You like to read?
I read, not as much as I used to. I like scientific manuals.
Okay.
Could be science fiction, but it could be. I like documentaries, especially. I like to read true stories. And
Non-fiction.
nonfiction, right? More than, I think, pretty much nonfiction. I just don't go for the other stuff very well. And
You stay in touch with any of your any of the guys from the 75th Infantry Division?
what's happened, Bob? The ones that I did keep in touch with have gone.
They died.
I had a good friend. He was a BAR man. You know what a BAR is?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually operated the BAR when I was in Marine Corps training in 1964.
He was a BAR man. He lives back in Massachusetts, and I'm here in California for the last 25, 30 years. And we used to have regular contacts. I'd write to him all the time. And I think he probably had some real problem with his health.
Right.
And one of the things was he fell off a ladder one time, and I don't think he ever recovered from that. He broke a leg or something, and he had a injury to his head, and he never fully recovered. But he was my best contact all these years. The other guys, I had one up in Massachusetts. He became a teacher up there at the University of Massachusetts. We kind of lost contact then, but he was in the same. Both these guys were in the same platoon that I was in. So those are the two main contacts. But the other people, either they died or during the war they were hurt, wounded or something, or they faded away for some reason or other. And one guy is down in Florida. He was not only in my platoon, he was in my class, high school class. He's in Florida, Bill Ritchie. He passed away 2 weeks ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Those are the three guys.
Right. Did you? Is there a 75th Infantry Division Association?
We had a big one when we first started. We don't have it anymore. They lasted maybe 2 years after the war was over. The division, the 75th Division Infantry Division alumni group was very active for a while. We went to a couple meetings with them, and they have a meeting in different parts of the country once a year. Boston one time, then LA another time. And no, that's it. That's my only contact. The only ones I have left now.
How do you feel your wartime experiences affected your life?
One way, Bob, I thought about this. You mentioned the other day. I've got to be careful how they say this, because I have no ill feelings with anybody. It's not, no person's involved here. But the one thing I found with a couple of the cases I give you was, you've got to have information. In your life, you've got to have a plan, and you've got to have a method and a logic for doing it. I learned that from some of the mistakes I saw in the service. If you don't have the information, it's very difficult for you to proceed in whatever you're doing. And when I'm talking about, I mean Intel, G2, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
If they can't supply you with the proper information, you're going to make mistakes. I saw that a couple times, not just with these I told you, but with other people in my group. You've got to have a plan, and you've got to have a method for approaching the plan, and you've got to have a logical means for carrying it out. I learned that in the service. Discipline helped me a lot. I don't mean washing your teeth every morning, but the discipline is doing something on a routine basis that you like to do and you want to do it. That's the discipline. I don't mean obeying instructions. In fact, I'm just the opposite. I call it this, Bob. Question authority. Always question authority. Even though you got to do it. Do whatever you have to do, but you can still question it.
Right.
And the reason why I say that is that I've seen a number, not too many, mistakes made by guys on top who had poor judgment, in my estimation.
Right.
And that cost lives sometimes.
That's stuff that
So
you learned.
question the boss. He may tell you to do something, do it, but you got every right in the world to question him some way or another. If not directly, but what you do or how you act or whatever.
So you use this methodology that you learned in the service, and you applied that to your own business.
I do.
And
I
was
did.
successful, right?
I did it constantly,
Yeah.
and always.
You were successful.
I always had a plan. Every time I got a new company, for example, I'd research them. Take an example, Hewlett-Packard's a big company in California. I would check them out. Of course, we didn't have computers in our days, but we had libraries and things like that. Check out who they were, what their history was, how they treated the representatives, what their reputation is, and they get the background information about them first. Then you get more personal by checking their financial situation. How are you doing in the stock market? How's your how's your profit? Are you making profits and so on? Check those things out first. If you have the time, you check some of their customers. What do you think about it, Hewlett Packard? Did they treat you right? Do they have good service for you? Then, if it looked good to me, I would sign up with the guy.
Right.
So I really did use a lot of that stuff in
So,
dealing with my companies.
These are also some of the life lessons that you learned from military service, right? That you've just explained to me. Life lessons.
Yeah,
These are the life lessons you
these
learned.
are life lessons. You're right. You're right.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and military in general?
Terrible. I know I'm quoting somebody, but war is hell. There's no question
I
about
think
it.
that went back to General Sherman.
I can't. Yeah, Sherman. He's the one that said that.
Yeah, I think he was, yeah. After
know
he,
it was
after
Sherman or
he, after he
Roosevelt
burned
or
down Atlanta,
Churchill.
I think he said that, yeah.
War is hell. That's all I learned. It's terrible. Anytime they got, whenever I see these politicians fooling around with what to do with this company, you got to think about the guy that's going to go and get his knife shot off. You know, he's the guy.
Those guys that are making these wars,
They don't go and fight.
they're not the ones that go.
They don't fight. No,
That's
no.
right,
You give it to someone else, and they're the guys that get killed and get their arms blown out.
yeah.
They don't think about that. I think about it every time. Korea. Get something going with them right now. It would be terrible. I can't even think of
That'd
the
be a
million,
horrible, horrible mess.
the million that would be shot and killed, and I think of that first.
All right, what message would you like to leave for future generations who will view or hear this interview?
Because of the interview,
Anybody that views or hears this interview, what message would you
Oh.
like to leave with them?
well, I just repeat what I just said, Bob. War is hell. And I couldn't say it this way. Stay away from the infantry. I can't say that, but
You can say that. There's nothing wrong with saying that.
well, no, I would say, Bob, and I mean it very seriously now. War is hell. Do all you can to avoid it at all costs. Don't get involved in a war. I keep thinking of the guys in the front lines. Stay away from it.
All right.
What else can I say?
Is there anything else that you feel we haven't discussed that you would like to add to this interview, and if so, what?
I don't know how else I can. I realize, Bob, that you have to do what's necessary. I understand that. And I think the question I always raise is, who decides that it's necessary? And under what conditions? If they can do that and still convince you, then I'll say, well, then you have no recourse. You have to go to war. I still go back to my, don't go to war unless you positively have to.
A last resort.
It's got to be a last resort, Bob. Otherwise, don't bother with it. I think the price you pay is too much. There's too many guys dead. I look at all the graves we have around the world, all these cemeteries and dead bodies laying there. Even the Civil War, 650,000 guys were killed in the Civil War.
Every single one of them an American. I agree with you. Has to be a last resort.
That's all I can say.
All right. Well, George, it's been a pleasure interviewing you. You're one of the best interviewers interviews that I've ever conducted, and I've done quite a few of them now. I sincerely appreciate your service to the United States of America during World War II and the sacrifice that you made. And believe me, I understand how much of a sacrifice it was.
Yeah, you know.
Right. So,
I thank you both, everybody, very much for
Yeah.
interviewing me anyway, and allowing me the chance
on
to.
behalf of the Conejo Valley chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, I'd like to thank you for your service and your sacrifice during World War II. Thank you, sir. Bye.